On my 64th birthday, my son Frank grabbed my cell phone and smashed it on the floor until it shattered. Then, with that same coldness, he called the police and told them I had assaulted him. His wife Sarah not only backed up the lie, she signed a false report accusing me of domestic violence. I didn't scream. I didn't raise my hand. I just did one thing they didn't expect. 3 months later, Frank and Sarah were in a total panic, and my daughter-in-law was desperately sorting through papers and documents, looking for something they were never going to find. But that comes later. Let me tell you how it all started. My name is Evelyn. I'm 64 years old, and my entire life I believed that being a good mother meant giving everything for my son. How wrong I was. Frank arrived at my house that afternoon with Sarah and their 2 children. It was my birthday. I had prepared everything with so much love. The table was set with my best china. I had cooked his favorite dish since he was a boy. I even bought that expensive wine he loves so much. But from the moment he walked through the door, Frank had an aggressive attitude. Sarah didn't even greet me. She sat on my sofa as if she owned the place, checking her phone, while her children ran all over the living room without any control. I asked Frank to control the children because they were knocking my ornaments onto the floor. His response was explosive. He yelled that this wasn't my house to give orders, that he paid the bills, that I was a useless old woman who knew nothing about raising children. His words hurt me more than any physical blow. But when I told him to lower his voice because we had guests, that's when he completely lost control. He approached me with rage in his eyes and snatched the phone from my hands. I had taken it out to record his behavior. Something told me I would need proof later. Frank took my phone and slammed it on the floor so hard it shattered into pieces. Then he pointed his finger at me and yelled that I was a crazy old woman who was losing her mind, that I needed to be locked up. Sarah, instead of calming her husband, got up from the sofa and started yelling at me too. She called me a toxic mother-in-law, said I was always creating problems, that Frank was right to be fed up with me. The children were crying in a corner, terrified by their parents' screams. I stood there paralyzed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the son I had raised alone after his father abandoned us, the boy I read stories to every night, the one I took to the hospital countless times when he was sick, the one I sent to college by working double shifts at the factory. And there he was, destroying my birthday, humiliating me in front of the whole family. But what came next was even worse. Frank took out his phone and called the police. With a calm, practiced voice, he told them his mother was having a violent episode, that she had threatened his family, that they needed help urgently. Lie after lie. Sarah took the phone and confirmed the whole false story. She even added details that never happened, saying I had tried to hit the children. When the police arrived, Frank and Sarah already had their version of the story ready. They said I had an anger attack, that I had broken my own phone, that I had threatened them with a kitchen knife. All lies. But the 2 of them spoke with such conviction, with so much detail, that the officers started to believe them. Sarah even cried while telling her false version. She said she was afraid for her children, that I was unpredictable, that she had noticed strange changes in my behavior lately. I tried to explain my side, but my voice was trembling with emotion. The police saw an elderly, upset woman facing a young couple who seemed very concerned for my well-being. Frank suggested they take me for a psychiatric evaluation. He said he had noticed symptoms of dementia, that sometimes I didn't recognize him, that he had found the stove left on several times for no reason. More lies. Sarah signed the report, backing up every word her husband said. She wrote that I had been aggressive, that I had screamed threats, that they had only come for my birthday to try and help me, and that I had reacted with violence. The humiliation was total. There I was in my own home on my birthday, being treated like a criminal by my own son. The guests had left in silence, embarrassed by the scene. My neighbors came to their windows to see the spectacle. The whole block saw me being questioned by the police, while Frank and Sarah acted like worried victims. That night, after everyone had left, I stayed alone in my wrecked home. The pieces of my phone were still on the floor. The food had gone cold on the table. The gifts I had prepared for my grandchildren remained unopened. I sat on my bed and cried until I ran out of tears. But deep within that pain, something began to awaken, a strength I didn't know I had. Because Frank and Sarah didn't know something very important. They didn't know the secret I had kept for all these years, a secret that was going to change everything. The day after my birthday disaster, Frank showed up at my house with a fake smile and a bouquet of cheap supermarket flowers, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just humiliated me. "Mom, forgive me for yesterday. I was stressed from work," he told me, using that sweet voice he used as a child when he'd done something wrong. But he wasn't a child anymore. He was a 38-year-old man who had called the police on his own mother. Sarah stayed in the car. She didn't even have the decency to get out and apologize. I could see her from the window, putting on makeup in the visor mirror, as if she were preparing for a date instead of asking for forgiveness. "Frank, you broke my phone," I said calmly. My voice wasn't shaking like the night before. Something had changed in me during those sleepless hours. "I'll buy you another one, Mom. A better one. You know I lose my temper sometimes. But you were upset too. The kids got very scared." The kids got scared. Was he seriously blaming me for scaring his children when he was the one who screamed like a lunatic and destroyed my phone? "And the false police report your wife signed." Frank shrugged with a casualness that chilled my blood. "It was necessary, Mom. You were very agitated. The police needed to understand the situation. Sarah just wanted to protect the family." Protect the family from me, her own mother-in-law. Over the next few weeks, Frank and Sarah established a perfect routine of manipulation. They came to my house every 2 or 3 days, always with different excuses. They needed me to watch the kids. Sarah had a doctor's appointment. Frank had to work late. But every visit was a new humiliation. Sarah would check my refrigerator and comment that the food was expired, even though I had just gone shopping. Frank would look through my mail without permission, saying he was worried about my finances. "Mom, this electric bill is very high. Are you leaving the lights on again?" He would ask me using that condescending tone you use with a small child. "What retirement are you talking about? You don't even have a pension." Sarah told me one day when I mentioned I was thinking about traveling, "You better accept reality. You're too old for those fantasies." They sat in my living room like they owned the place, deciding what shows to watch on my TV, eating my food, using my bathroom without even asking. Sarah even started bringing her own towels because she said mine smelled weird. Frank began telling the neighbors he was worried about my mental health. He told Mrs. Thompson next door that he'd noticed changes in my behavior, that I forgot important things, that he'd found the stove on for no reason. All lies. But Mrs. Thompson started looking at me with pity when I went out to sweep the sidewalk. She even asked if I needed help remembering to take my medicine. What medicine? I was perfectly healthy. But Frank had planted the seed of doubt in the entire neighborhood. Sarah was even crueler. When we were alone, she'd say things like, "Evelyn, you're not young anymore. Frank has his own family now. You can't keep clinging to him like when he was a boy." Or, "You should consider moving into a nursing home. There are very nice places where you'd be better cared for." A nursing home. Me. A woman who had worked her whole life, who had raised my son alone, who had kept my house spotless for decades. But what hurt the most was seeing how Frank treated his own children in front of me. He yelled at them for everything. He punished them for behaving like normal kids. And when I tried to intervene, he told me not to meddle in their upbringing. "You raised one son badly, Mom. Let me raise mine right." He told me that one afternoon when I tried to defend my 5-year-old grandson who had only spilled a little juice. That sentence pierced my heart. Raised badly. I had sacrificed my youth, my dreams, my chances to remarry, all to give Frank the best life possible. After his father abandoned us when he was 8, I worked double shifts at the factory. I came home with cracked hands and swollen feet, but I always had energy to help him with his homework, to take him to the park on Sundays, to cook his favorite food. I sold my jewelry to pay for his English classes. I took out loans to finance his college. I turned down suitors because Frank told me he didn't like them, that no man was good enough for his mom. And now, after all that, he told me I had raised him badly. That night when they left, I sat in the kitchen where I had prepared thousands of dinners for Frank. I remembered all the times I had cried in silence when he was a teenager and yelled that he hated me. All the times I had worked sick so I wouldn't lose the salary we needed. I remembered the day he graduated from college and hugged me crying, telling me I was the best mother in the world, that everything he had achieved was thanks to me. Where did that grateful son go? When had he turned into this cruel man who treated me like a burden? But as I cried in that silent kitchen, something began to awaken in me. A memory I had buried deep inside for all these years. Because Frank and Sarah didn't know the truth about my real situation. They didn't know where the few luxuries I had in my house really came from. They didn't know why I never really worried about money, even though I pretended to. They didn't know the secret I had guarded for decades, a secret that was about to change the whole game. The humiliation reached its peak one Tuesday afternoon. Frank arrived with Sarah and 2 large suitcases. No warning, no asking. They simply announced they were staying at my house for a few days because they had problems with their landlord. "Mom, it's temporary, just until we find something better," Frank told me while Sarah was already putting her things in my master bedroom. My bedroom. "Evelyn, I hope you don't mind. We need the big room because we have more clothes," Sarah said with that fake smile I knew so well. They sent me to sleep in the small room that had been Frank's when he was a boy. The room where I had sewn late into the night to earn extra money. Where I had cried silently every night after his father left us. But the worst part wasn't sleeping in a smaller room. The worst part was becoming a stranger in my own house. Sarah reorganized my kitchen to her liking, moved my pots, changed my spices, threw out food that she said was expired even though I had just bought it. Frank set up his computer in my living room and worked from there, taking up the whole space with his papers and cables. The children ran all over the house screaming and breaking things, while Sarah watched TV, paying them no attention. When I tried to calm them down, they told me I wasn't their real grandmother, that their mom had told them I was just the lady who took care of Dad when he was little. The lady who took care of Dad. That's what Sarah had told them I was. One night, while I was preparing dinner for all of them as if I were the maid in my own house, I heard Frank talking on the phone in my bedroom. The door was slightly open, and his words reached me clearly. "Yeah, Charles. We're living here now. The old woman is getting worse every day. She can't take care of herself anymore. No, she has nothing of value, just this old house. But when something happens, at least we'll already be settled here." He was referring to my death. My own son was planning for my death, waiting for it, as if it were a long-term investment. Sarah laughed from the other side of the room. "Tell Charles I already checked all the house papers. There's nothing complicated. When the time comes, it will be an easy transfer." What papers had she checked? When had she rummaged through my personal documents? That same night I confronted them. I walked into my bedroom where they were lying down, watching TV like royalty in my own bed. "Frank, what papers did Sarah check?" "Oh, Mom, don't start with your paranoia. Sarah was just organizing your documents. You had them all messed up. We found the deed to the house, your old will, things like that." "My will?" "Yeah, that paper where you leave everything in my name. It's fine, Mom. Don't worry. Even if it's a little outdated, it works." Sarah smiled from the bed. "Evelyn, we also found your bank statements. You have very few savings, but don't worry. When Frank inherits the house, we'll sell it and move you to a place more appropriate for your age." Sell my house. Move me to a place appropriate for my age. "This is my house," I told them with a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "For now, Mom. But you have to be realistic. You can't maintain such a big house anymore. It's too much for you." Frank got out of bed and approached me with that condescending smile I hated so much. "Look, Mom, we've been thinking. There's a very nice nursing home just outside the city. It has gardens, activities, people your age. You'd be much better off there. And we could stay here." "Taking care of the house until we sell it," Sarah added. "It would be best for everyone." Best for everyone, except me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake in the small room, listening to Frank's snores in my bed, watching the shadows of the trees I had planted 20 years ago move on the walls I had painted with my own hands. I had bought this house with money from years of working at the factory. Every brick, every tile, every window had been paid for with my sweat. And now, my own son wanted to sell it to get rid of me. But as I lay there, I remembered something I had forgotten for years, something I had buried deep in my memory because it was too painful. The day Frank turned 18, his biological father showed up at our door after 10 years of absence. He was sick, needed money, wanted to get to know his son. Frank welcomed him with open arms, as if those 10 years of abandonment had never existed. That man stayed in our house for 3 months, filling Frank's head with lies about me. He told him I had kept them apart, that I was a bitter woman who didn't know how to forgive. Lies. When he finally left, he took the savings I had put away for Frank's college, and my son defended him. He told me his father had a right to that money, that I was selfish for not wanting to help him. That's when something between Frank and me broke forever, but I kept fighting for him because he was my son. I worked double shifts to recover the stolen money. I took out loans. I went deep into debt. And now, 25 years later, Frank was doing the exact same thing to me that his father did. He was using me, manipulating me, stealing my peace and my home. But this time would be different, because Frank and Sarah didn't know something very important about me. They didn't know that for all these years, I had been preparing for this moment. They didn't know about the conversations I'd had with my lawyer Charles months ago. They didn't know about the documents I had signed in secret. And above all, they didn't know about the inheritance I had received from my sister Esther 5 years ago, an inheritance I never mentioned to anyone, one I deposited into an account they knew nothing about. Frank thought I was a poor, vulnerable old woman. What a surprise he was going to get. The final straw came on a Friday night. Frank had invited his friends to my house without asking me. 8 people showed up with beer and loud music, as if it were their private party. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard Frank talking to his guests in the living room. His words froze my blood. "Yeah, it's my mom's house, but it's practically mine. The old woman is losing her mind. She can't live alone anymore. Soon we're going to put her in a home and I'll take charge of everything." His friends laughed. One of them said, "That's great, Frank. This house is in a very expensive area. You'll get good money when you sell it." Exactly. Sarah already found the perfect nursing home for her. It's cheap and far away, so she won't be bothering us. My hands trembled as I chopped vegetables. A cheap nursing home, far away, so I wouldn't bother them. Sarah appeared in the kitchen with a venomous smile. "Evelyn, can you prepare some food for Frank's guests? And please, don't butt into the conversation. This is adult talk." Adult talk. As if I were a child. As if I weren't the owner of the house where they were celebrating. That night after the guests left, leaving my living room a disaster, I locked myself in the small room and took out a box I kept hidden in the back of the closet. A box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the letters my sister Esther had written to me before she died. The last letter had a sentence that now took on a special meaning. "Evelyn, save this money for when you really need it. And believe me, you will know exactly when that moment arrives." My sister Esther had been a very intelligent woman. She never married, never had children, but she built a real estate empire that no one in the family knew about. When she died, she left me an inheritance of $2 million, which I deposited into a secret account. I had lied to Frank about that inheritance. I told him Esther had only left me some old furniture and family mementos. He didn't even ask for details, too busy with his own life to be interested in his single aunt. That inheritance was my secret weapon, my escape plan, and the time had come to use it. The next day, Saturday, Frank and Sarah left early with the children. They said they were going to the park, but from the number of bags they took, it was obvious they were going to a friend's house for the whole weekend. Perfect. It was exactly what I needed. I called my lawyer, Charles, the same one who had drafted my will years ago. Charles was a trustworthy, discreet man, and above all, someone who perfectly understood toxic family dynamics. Charles will need to see you urgently. It's time to activate the plan we discussed months ago. Evelyn, are you sure? Once we start, there's no going back. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. We met in his office that same afternoon. Charles had all the documents prepared that we had discussed months ago, back when I first started to suspect Frank's true intentions. "The new will is ready," Charles said, reviewing the papers. "Frank is completely cut out of the inheritance. The house and all your assets go to a charity of your choosing. I also have the power of attorney here revoking the previous will. And the bank account documents. All in order. Your sister's inheritance money is protected in an account that only you can manage. Frank has no legal access to any of it." I signed each document with a sense of liberation I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, I was in control of my own life. "Charles, there's one more thing I want you to do. Tell me. I want you to investigate Frank and Sarah's finances. I suspect they're in more serious trouble than they admit." Charles smiled. "I already took care of that, Evelyn. When you told me about their behavior, I made some discreet inquiries. They're bankrupt. They owe 3 months' rent. They have credit card debts over $50,000, and the bank is about to repossess their car." It all made sense now. The urgency to move into my house, the rush to put me in a home, the comments about selling the property. It wasn't just cruelty. It was financial desperation. "That's why they're so anxious to get rid of you," Charles continued. "They need your house to save their financial situation." "And what would happen if they found out they aren't going to inherit anything?" "They would panic. They'd probably try to manipulate or pressure you into changing the will. That's why I recommend you keep this secret until the right moment." I returned home that night with a sense of power I hadn't experienced in decades. Frank and Sarah were still out. My house was silent, and for the first time in months I could sit in my own living room without anyone bothering me. But my peace didn't last long. On Sunday night, they returned with an even more aggressive attitude than before. "Mom, we've been thinking," Frank began as he served himself a plate of the food I had prepared. "We believe it's time for you to make an adult decision about your future." Sarah sat next to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Evelyn, we visited a beautiful nursing home. It has gardens, activities, 24-hour nurses. It would be perfect for you." "And we could stay here taking care of the house," Frank added. "It would be temporary, of course, until we sell it and buy something smaller where you can live comfortably." I stayed silent, staring at them. They interpreted my silence as submission. "It's best if you move. Next week," Sarah continued. "We already spoke with the administration. They have a room available." "Next week." "Yes, Mom, it's time. You can't keep living in denial." Frank got up and put his hand on my shoulder with a false tenderness that made me sick. "It's going to be best for everyone, Mom. You'll be better cared for, and we'll have the peace of mind knowing you're safe." That night, while they celebrated their plan to get rid of me in my bedroom, I stayed awake planning my revenge because Frank and Sarah had just made their biggest mistake. They had completely underestimated me. On Monday morning, while Frank and Sarah slept in my bed, after another night of celebrating their future without me, I made the most important decision of my life. It was time to leave, but not in the way they expected. I waited until they left the house. Frank had a work meeting, and Sarah took the children to school. I had approximately 3 hours to execute my plan. I called Charles from the kitchen landline. "It's time. I need you to come with the truck we discussed." "Are you completely sure, Evelyn?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." While I waited for Charles, I began to pack my most valuable things. Not the old clothes I wore when Frank and Sarah were home, but my good clothes, the ones I saved for special occasions, the important documents, my mother's jewelry, the family photographs from when Frank was little and still loved me. I also packed something they would never expect me to take, the recordings. For the past few weeks, I had been secretly recording all the conversations where Frank and Sarah talked about getting rid of me, about selling my house, about putting me in the nursing home. My old phone had a recording app they didn't know existed. I had recorded Frank's phone calls with his friends, Sarah's cruel comments about my age and my supposed dementia, even the conversation where they planned the transfer of the property. Charles arrived right on time with a large truck and 2 trusted employees. All set, all set. We loaded my belongings in silence. I didn't take much, just the essentials and what had sentimental value. I left behind the furniture, the dishes, everything that Frank and Sarah had been mentally cataloging as part of their future inheritance. "Where are we going?" Charles asked me as I closed the door of my house for the last time. "To the place you reserved for me." Charles smiled. He had rented a beautiful apartment in the most exclusive area of the city, a place with 24-hour security, a panoramic view, and all the luxury I had denied myself for years so I could give Frank the best possible education. It was time to live for myself. The apartment was perfect, spacious, bright, with a terrace where I could drink coffee while watching the sunrise. For the first time in decades, I had a space that was completely mine, where no one yelled at me, where no one treated me like a burden. Charles helped me get settled, and then we sat in the new living room to plan the next phase. "Frank and Sarah are going to panic when they realize you're gone," he told me, reviewing the legal documents. "Let them panic, they deserve it. They'll probably try to find you. They'll call the police. They'll say you're lost, that you have dementia. I have the recordings to prove I am perfectly sane, and you as my lawyer can confirm my mental state." And Charles nodded. "When do you want to start the next phase of the plan?" "Let them suffer for a few days. Let them get desperate looking for me. Let them realize what they've lost." That night from my new terrace, I called the landline of my old house. Frank answered on the second ring. His voice sounded desperate. "Mom, where are you? We've been looking everywhere for you. We're so worried." "I'm fine, Frank." "Where are you? Come home immediately. Sarah is crying. The kids miss you." Lies. The kids barely spoke to me when I lived there. "I'm not coming back, Frank." "What do you mean you're not coming back? That's your house." "It was my house. Now it's different." "Mom, you're confused. You have to come back. You can't live alone. You have no money. You have nowhere to go." "You're wrong about everything, son." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Sarah talking in the background, probably telling him what to say. "Look, Mom, if you're upset about the nursing home, we can talk about it. It doesn't have to be immediately." "It's not about the nursing home, Frank. It's about respect. We respect you, Mom. We've always respected you. Breaking my phone is respect. Calling the police is respect. Signing a false report is respect. Mom, we already talked about that. It was a misunderstanding. Planning to sell my house without my permission is a misunderstanding." Another silence. This time longer. I don't know what you're talking about." "I have recordings, Frank. I have every conversation recorded where you planned to get rid of me." That's impossible. Your phone was broken." "I have more than one phone, son." I hung up before he could answer. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again, but I didn't answer. It rang 20 more times that night, but I was busy enjoying my new freedom. The next day, Charles brought me interesting news. "Frank went to the police station to report you as a missing person. He says you have mental problems and are in danger." "And what did they tell him?" "That you are an adult in full possession of your mental faculties, that you have the right to live wherever you want, and that if he's so worried he can hire a private detective to find you." I laughed for the first time in months. "And Sarah?" "Sarah went to your old house and tore everything apart. She was looking for something, probably financial documents or the will, but she didn't find anything important because we have it all here." "Perfect." "Evelyn, there's something else you should know. Frank called the bank asking about your accounts. He wanted to know if you had money saved somewhere." "And what did they tell him?" "Nothing. He's not an authorized family member, but it worries me that he's so desperate to find your financial resources." "Let him be desperate. Soon, he's going to find out exactly what my financial situation is." It was time to move on to the next phase of the plan. It was time for Frank and Sarah to meet the real Evelyn. I decided it was time to make my first public appearance. Charles had gotten me an appointment at the most exclusive real estate agency in the city, where I wanted to buy a new house. But before that, I needed to completely change my image. I went to the most expensive salon in the area. I got my hair cut, I had a manicure, a pedicure, and I asked them to do my makeup as if I were going to a gala. Then I went to the most elegant boutique and bought a burgundy-colored dress that cost more than Frank earned in a month. When I saw myself in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. It wasn't the tired, elderly woman I had been for years. It was an elegant, confident woman with money and power. The appointment at the real estate agency was at 3 p.m. I arrived in a luxury taxi, got out with all the elegance in the world, and walked in as if I owned the place. The real estate agent, a young man named Anthony, greeted me with that professional smile they reserve for important clients. "Mrs. Evelyn, it's a pleasure to meet you. I understand you're interested in our premium properties." "That's right. I'm looking for something large with a garden in the best area of the city. Price is not an issue." Anthony showed me several catalogs of houses costing between $500,000 and $1 million. Beautiful houses, with pools, huge gardens, multiple bedrooms. "This one is perfect," I said, pointing to a gorgeous colonial house with a view of the lake. "When can I see it?" "Of course, ma'am, but I would need to verify your purchasing power before scheduling the visit. It's company protocol." "Of course." I took the bank statement that Charles had prepared for me from my purse. Anthony read it, and his eyes went wide. "Mrs. Evelyn, this is more than enough. When would you like to see the property?" "Right now, if possible." While Anthony made the calls to coordinate the immediate visit, I heard familiar voices at the entrance of the agency. My heart sped up. Frank and Sarah had just walked in. They looked desperate. Sarah had deep, dark circles under her eyes, and Frank was unshaven, as if he hadn't slept in days. They were coming to ask about the value of my old house, probably to find out how much money they could get from selling it. They hadn't seen me yet. They were talking to the receptionist, explaining that they wanted to appraise a property for an urgent sale. "We need to sell fast," I heard Sarah say. "It's a complicated family situation." I decided this was the perfect moment for my grand reveal. I stood up from my seat and walked toward them, with all the elegance my new dress and my new confidence allowed. "Hello, Frank. Hello, Sarah." They turned around and stared at me as if they had seen a ghost. The transformation was so radical that it took them several seconds to recognize me. "Mom," Frank stammered. What are you doing here?" "The same as you, I imagine, talking about property." Sarah recovered from the shock first. "Evelyn, we've been looking everywhere for you. We're so worried. Where have you been?" "In my new apartment. It's beautiful. You should visit it sometime." "Your new apartment?" Frank seemed confused. "With what money?" "With my money, son." "What money? You don't have any money." Anthony approached at that moment with a huge smile. "Mrs. Evelyn, the owner, has confirmed the visit for right now. Are you ready to see your new $800,000 house?" The silence that followed was so deep you could hear the office air conditioning. Frank and Sarah stared at me with their mouths open. $800,000, Sarah whispered. "It's an important investment," I said calmly. "But I have more than enough." Frank found his voice. "Mom, that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. Your bank account barely has a few thousand." "You mean the account that you know about. But it's not the only one I have." What do you mean?" I took out my wallet and showed the bank statement to Frank. His eyes darted back and forth, reading the numbers, trying to process what he was seeing. $2,400,000, he read aloud. This has to be a mistake." "It's no mistake. It's the inheritance from my sister Esther, plus the investments I made with that money over the last 5 years." "Aunt Esther's inheritance?" Sarah looked like she was hyperventilating. "But you said she only left you old furniture." I lied. Frank approached me with that desperate look he used to get as a child when he'd done something wrong. "Mom, this is fantastic. It means we can buy a better house for all of us. A big house where we can all live comfortably." "All of us." "Yes, Mom, the family. We can move into a new house together." "No." What do you mean, no? I'm not buying a house for you, Frank. I'm buying a house for me. Sarah stepped forward with fake tears in her eyes. Evelyn, we're family. You can't just abandon us like this. Family. The word came out with a bitterness that surprised even me. Is family smashing my phone on my birthday? Is family calling the police? Is family signing false reports? Mom, we already apologized for that. Is family planning to put me in a nursing home without my consent? Is family planning to sell my house as family, telling people I'm losing my mind? Frank and Sarah exchanged panicked glances. They knew I had them trapped. Mom, we can explain all of that. You don't need to explain anything. I have recordings of all your conversations. That's illegal, Sarah yelled at me. Not when you're recording in your own home. Anthony cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mrs. Evelyn, do you want to postpone the visit? Not at all, Anthony. Let's go right now. As I walked toward the exit of the agency, I heard Frank yelling behind me. Mom, you can't do this. You're our mother. You have obligations to the family. I turned around one last time to look at him. My only obligation now is to myself. And I walked out of there with my head held high, leaving them with their desperation and their ruined plans. The house I bought was even more beautiful than I had imagined. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garden with a pool, and my dream kitchen. I paid for it in cash, no financing, just to prove to myself that I could. Frank and Sarah didn't take long to find my new address. A week after I moved in, they showed up at my door with the kids and suitcases again. Mom, we're coming to live with you, Frank announced as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This house is gorgeous, Sarah said, pushing the children inside without waiting for an invitation. The kids are going to be so happy here. Stop right there, I said, blocking the entrance. No one invited you in. We're family, Mom. We don't need an invitation. After what you did to me, you definitely need an invitation, and you don't have one. Frank tried to gently push me aside to get past. Mom, don't be ridiculous. This house is clearly too big for you alone. You need company. What I need is peace. Sarah approached with that fake smile I knew so well. Evelyn, we understand you're upset, but it's time to leave the resentment behind. The children need stability. The children are not my responsibility. You're their grandmother. I am the grandmother you wanted to lock up in a nursing home. Frank changed tactics. He put on that sorry little boy face he used when he wanted to manipulate me. Mom, we made mistakes. We admit it. But now we can start over. In this beautiful house, as a united family. A united family, I repeated sarcastically. Like when you filed a false police report. Mom, that's in the past. No, Frank, that doesn't just pass. That is remembered forever. Sarah lost her patience. Look, Evelyn, we get that you have money now, but that doesn't change the fact that we are your family. You can't buy affection. You're right, Sarah. I can't buy affection. But I'm not going to keep giving it away to people who don't deserve it either. What do you mean by that? I took out my phone and played one of the recordings I had saved. It was the conversation where Frank told his friends that I was losing my mind and that they would soon have me committed. Their faces turned pale as they heard their own voices, planning my future without consulting me. How did you get that? Frank murmured. I have many more. Do you want to hear the one where Sarah says I'm a burden, or the one where you say you're going to sell my house to pay your debts? Sarah took a step back. That was taken out of context. What context could possibly justify planning to get rid of me? Frank tried to get closer, but I held my ground at the door. Mom, we all say things when we're stressed. We didn't mean it. Oh, yes, you did. You meant it so much that you had already picked out the nursing home. The children were crying, confused by the tension. Sarah grabbed their hands dramatically. Look what you're doing, Evelyn. You're traumatizing the children. The children are traumatized because their parents don't know how to behave like adults. Fine, Frank said, taking a deep breath. We understand you're upset, but we're family. Family forgives each other. Family also respects each other, and you lost my respect forever. Mom, without us, you're going to be all alone. I'd rather be alone than in bad company," Sarah exploded. "You are a selfish old woman. After everything Frank did for you." "Everything Frank did for me?" I laughed bitterly. "Are you talking about him smashing my phone, calling the police, planning to put me in a home? I'm talking about him taking care of you, worrying about you, coming to visit me so he could plan how to get rid of me." Frank tried one last strategy. "Mom, if you don't let us stay, we're going to have to live on the street. We were evicted from our apartment. That is not my problem. We are your family. No, a family doesn't do what you did to me." Sarah approached with crocodile tears. "Evelyn, please. The children aren't to blame for any of this." "You're right. The children aren't to blame. But it's also not my responsibility to fix the problems that you created. So what, you're just going to leave us on the street? You're going to do what all responsible adults do. You're going to find jobs. You're going to rent a place you can afford. You're going to live within your means." Frank looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "I can't believe you're this cruel." "Cruel? I'm cruel after everything you did to me. We are asking you for help. No, you are demanding that I maintain the same pattern as always, that I sacrifice myself to solve your problems. You're our mother. I am a woman who deserves respect, and until you understand that there is nothing more to talk about." I closed the door in their faces. I stood on the other side listening to them yell and try to convince me to open it. "Mom, this isn't over," Frank shouted. "We're going to talk to a lawyer. You can't just abandon your family." "We're going to sue you for abandonment," Sarah added. "You have legal obligations to us." Their shouts gradually faded. From the window, I watched them get into their car and drive away. Frank was driving furiously, gesturing and yelling at Sarah. That night I called Charles to tell him what happened. "It was to be expected," he said. "Now that they know you have money, they will try everything to get it." "Can they really sue me?" "They have no legal basis. You are an independent adult in full possession of your faculties. You have no legal obligation to support your adult son or his family. And if they try to say I have mental problems, we have the recordings that prove they are the ones who were planning everything. Besides, your behavior during the house purchase proves you are perfectly sane." "What do you think they'll do now?" "They will try to manipulate public opinion. They'll probably say you're an unfit mother who abandoned her family. Be prepared for that." Charles was right. What I didn't know was just how far they were willing to go. 2 days after the confrontation at my new house, Charles called me with worrying news. "Evelyn, Frank, and Sarah have started a social media campaign. They're saying you're an unfit mother who abandoned her family." "Seriously?" "They uploaded a video to Facebook where Sarah cries and tells everyone how you kicked them out of your new house. She says her children are traumatized because their grandmother rejected them." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. After everything they had done to me, now they were painting me as the villain of the story. "What else are they saying?" "Frank made a very long post explaining how he sacrificed years of his life taking care of you, how he moved into your house to keep you company in your old age, and how now that you've inherited money from your sister, you've abandoned them like trash. It's all lies." "Of course it's lies. But people don't know your side of the story. They're only seeing their version." "Are a lot of people seeing it?" "The video already has over 5,000 views and hundreds of comments. Most of them support Frank and Sarah. They're saying you're a bad mother, that children are for life, that the money corrupted you." I stayed silent, processing the information. Frank and Sarah had decided to destroy my reputation publicly. "Charles, what can we do? We can fight back. But we need to be smart. Are you willing to tell your side of the story publicly?" "Yes, it's time for people to know the truth." "Then we need to create content that is more impactful than theirs. With the recordings you have, we can completely dismantle their narrative." That afternoon, Charles helped me create my own social media profile. I had never used Facebook or Instagram, but it was time to learn. My first post was simple but powerful, a photo of me in my new house, with a caption that said, "At 64, I discovered that sometimes the family you choose is better than the family that was given to you." In just a few hours, I had hundreds of comments, some of support, others of criticism. But everyone wanted to know more about my story. Frank didn't take long to respond. He did a live broadcast from his car, crying and saying that I had lost my mind ever since I inherited the money. "Mom isn't the same," he said with fake tears. "The money changed her completely. She threw us out of her house like we were strangers. Sarah is devastated. The children ask about their grandmother every day." Isabel appeared in the broadcast with red, swollen eyes. "Evelyn was like a second mother to me," she sobbed. "I don't understand how she can be so cruel. All we wanted was to be close to her, to take care of her." The comments on their broadcast were devastating to me. What a horrible mother. How can she abandon her grandchildren? Money brings out the worst in people. Frank, you should sue her for abandonment. That lady is clearly senile. I couldn't sleep that night. Frank and Sarah had managed to manipulate hundreds of people into hating me without ever knowing my side of the story. The next day, Charles came to my house with a plan. "It's time for you to do your own live broadcast, but this time with proof." "Are you sure?" "Completely. The truth always wins, Evelyn. We just need to present it the right way." We prepared everything carefully. I dressed elegantly. We made sure the video quality was perfect, and Charles helped me organize all the recordings in chronological order. "Remember," he told me before we started, "stay calm, present the facts, let the recordings speak for themselves." I started the broadcast at 8 p.m. when the most people would be online. "Good evening. My name is Evelyn. I am 64 years old. And I want to tell you the truth about what really happened with my son Frank and my daughter-in-law Sarah." In the first few minutes, only a few people were watching, but the number began to grow rapidly. Charles had invited several people from the community, and they were sharing the broadcast. For the past few months, I have been a victim of emotional abuse by my own family. Tonight, I am going to prove to you how my son and daughter-in-law planned to get rid of me to take my property. I started by playing the recording from my birthday, where you could clearly hear Frank screaming at me and then calling the police. The comments on the broadcast changed immediately. "Oh my God, what a horrible son. I can't believe he yelled at his mother like that. Calling the police on your own mother is unforgivable." Next, I played the conversation where Frank told his friends I was losing my mind and that they would soon have me committed. "Can you hear that?" I asked the camera. This was not brotherly love. This was a calculated plan to take my belongings. Then I played the recording where Sarah talked about selling my house and finding a cheap nursing home far away. "This is what my daughter-in-law really thought of me," I explained. "She wasn't a concerned daughter. She was a woman who wanted to get rid of a burden." The number of people watching the broadcast had reached over 3,000. The comments were now completely different. "Evelyn, you are a warrior. How brave you are to expose this publicly. Your son and daughter-in-law are manipulators. You did the right thing by getting away from that toxicity." Then I played the most damning recording of all. Frank on the phone, talking about how they were practically settled in my house, just waiting for something to happen to me. The silence in the comments was total for a few seconds. Then they exploded. "This is sociopathic. They were waiting for you to die. How can they be so cruel? Frank should be in jail." By the end of the broadcast, I had over 5,000 people watching. I finished with a clear message. At 64 years old, I have learned that true love does not manipulate. It doesn't blackmail. It doesn't abuse. I walked away from my son because I chose to value myself, and I do not regret it. The reaction after my live broadcast was overwhelming. In less than 24 hours, the video had been shared over 10,000 times. The comments of support poured in by the hundreds every hour. "Evelyn, you are an inspiration to all older women. Thank you for teaching us that it's never too late to defend yourself. Your son should be begging for your forgiveness on his knees." But the reaction from Frank and Sarah was predictable. They did another live broadcast trying to discredit my recordings. "Those recordings are edited," Frank yelled desperately. "My mom manipulated them to sound bad. She is slandering us publicly," Sarah cried even more dramatically than before. "Evelyn is destroying us. She's taking away our jobs, our friends, everything, just because she didn't want to share her inheritance with the family." But it was too late. People had heard the full recordings. There was no way to deny what their own voices had revealed. The comments on their new broadcast were brutal. "Nobody believes you anymore. The recordings speak for themselves. Stop playing the victim. You are the abusers. Frank, get a job and stop being a parasite to your mother. Sarah, you are a professional manipulator." 3 days later, Charles brought me news that filled me with satisfaction. "Frank lost his job," he informed me with a smile. His boss saw the recordings and decided he didn't want employees who abuse their elderly mothers. Seriously. And there's more. The landlord of the apartment where they used to live is suing them for property damage. Apparently they destroyed several things before they left. "And Sarah?" "Sarah also lost her part-time job at the shop. The owner is an older lady who identified with you after seeing your broadcast." It was poetic justice. For months they had tried to destroy my reputation and my self-esteem. Now they were experiencing the consequences of their own actions. But Frank didn't give up. A week later he appeared at my door again, but this time he came alone, and with a completely different attitude. "Mom, I've come to ask for your forgiveness," he told me with real tears this time. "I've been reflecting on everything that happened. You're right. I behaved like a monster." I looked at him through the gate of my new house without opening it. "Where is Sarah?" "She left. She left me when we lost everything. She said she wasn't going to stay with a loser with no job and no money." For a moment I felt pity for him, but then I remembered all the nights I had cried because of him, and the pity vanished. "Frank, it's very easy to ask for forgiveness when you have nothing left to gain." "No, Mom. I realized that I truly hurt you, that I was a horrible son, that I treated you like trash when you gave me everything." "Yes, you did. Could you forgive me? Could we try to fix our relationship?" I looked at him for a long moment. This was the son I had raised, the one I had loved unconditionally for 38 years. A part of me wanted to open that gate and hug him, but another part, the part that had learned to value herself, knew that I couldn't. "Frank, forgiveness is a process. It's not something that can be forced or rushed. I understand, but is there hope? Is there a possibility that one day you could forgive me?" "Maybe, but I would have to see real changes in you, not just words when you're desperate." "What kind of changes?" "Starting by taking responsibility for your own life, getting a job, supporting your children, becoming the man I believed you were." Frank nodded. "I'm going to try, Mom. I'm going to prove that I can change." "I hope so, for the sake of your children." He walked away head down, and I watched from the window as he got on a public bus. He didn't have a car anymore. He didn't have the comfortable life he had tried to build at the cost of my suffering. 6 months later, Charles visited me with news about Frank. He got a job in a factory. He's living in a small apartment with the kids. Sarah hasn't come back. "How is he with the children?" "From what I hear, he's being a better father. He treats them with more patience. He spends time with them. He doesn't ES1 sissies 3 to yell at them anymore." "I'm glad to hear that. Have you thought about contacting him?" "Every day, but I'm not ready yet." Charles understood. Time will tell if he's really changed, or if he's just acting until he finds another opportunity. He was right. Time would be the only judge of whether Frank had truly learned his lesson. Meanwhile, I had started a new life. I joined a book club. I took painting classes. I traveled to places I had always wanted to see. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself. One afternoon, while I was watering the flowers in my garden, I received a text message from Frank. "Mom, I know you don't want to talk to me yet. I just wanted to tell you I got a promotion at work. The kids are doing well. And every day I think about how much I hurt you. I love you." I didn't reply, But I saved the message. It was a small step toward redemption, because I had learned something fundamental. True love is not begged for, it's not demanded, it's not manipulated. It is earned, with respect, with consistency, with actions that prove the change is real. Frank had to lose everything to understand what truly mattered. If he wanted to earn back my love, he would have to prove it, day by day, without pressure, without blackmail, and without false tears. Meanwhile, I had found something I didn't know I had lost: my own dignity. I didn't regret adopting him when he was an orphan. I only regretted not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction. Now at 64, I was finally free.